In this lesson, we're going to discuss security zones. Security zones are portions of the network that have specific security concerns or requirements. All devices within the same zone have the same security access and protection needs. These zones are often separated by a traffic control device such as a firewall or a router that filters incoming and outbound traffic. For example, you can define a zone that includes all hosts on your private network that need to be protected from the internet. You can also define a zone within your network for controlled access to specific servers that hold sensitive information. There are several types of security zones that can be implemented. Let's start with a security zone known as a screened subnet. A screened subnet is used as a public-facing accessible network. It acts as a buffer and a barrier to your internal production network, which is accessible from the internet. A screened subnet can be configured using either one or two firewalls and acts as the middleman between the internet and your internal network. For example, a screened subnet is often used to allow employees access to critical network components, such as email servers, VPN connections, and internal web servers from outside the company. Screened subnets also provide customer access to a company's products, such as software. To do this, the firewall allows traffic from the internet into the screened subnet and enables those resources to access resources on the production network. The servers placed in the screened subnet are typically configured as a bastion host. A bastion host is a server that's specifically designed and configured to withstand attacks. In general, they're specific purpose systems that host a single application and are hardened to resist attacks. Another type of security zone is a wireless network zone. A wireless network zone is a broadcasted network connection used within an organization where users don't need a physical connection to a network port to connect to internal resources. Instead, they use a wireless connection on their device to connect to a wireless access point. For internal users, the effect is the same as if the user's device has a physical connection and provides access to internal resources. Several organizations also create a guest network that allows non-internal staff to access the internet. In some cases, guests may also be granted access to a few limited internal resources. A Honeynet contains servers designed to trap attackers. The servers, or honeypots, contain intentional vulnerabilities to lure attackers. Attackers believe they're accessing vulnerable systems, but they're really inside a trap. Honeypots are designed to mimic production servers that would be found in a typical organization. Of course, they contain no real company information, so there's little risk of exposure. The honeypots track an attacker's activity and can generate extremely useful security information. An ad hoc network is a decentralized network that allows connections without a traditional base station or router. It allows users to connect two or more devices directly to each other for a specific purpose. Ad hoc is a Latin term that translates to "for this," and ad hoc networks are usually temporary solutions for a specific task. Ad hoc connections can be wired or wireless. If you're connecting two systems with an Ethernet cable, it must be a crossover cable. An ad hoc network can also be created using Wi-Fi. Of course, the Wi-Fi parameters and protocols must match and be compatible with each other, including the SSID, security, and encryption settings. Network Address Translation, or NAT, provides global IP address conversion for the entire network and is usually performed by your Internet Gateway or NAT server. NAT allows network administrators to manage IP addresses within the internal network using whatever private IPs they want. When a user needs to access the internet, the NAT server then translates these internal private IP addresses to public IP addresses that the internet can recognize. The organization's internet service provider can supply internal routable IP addresses and assign them to the organization. When information returns, the Internet Gateway converts the public address back to the private address and sends it on to the private network end user. That's it for this lesson. In this lesson, we discussed several types of security zones. First, we discussed screened subnets, where servers are placed for public access. Next, we discussed wireless zones, which allow employees to access internal resources using Wi-Fi and provide guest networks that limit access. Then we talked about honeynets, which are used to trap attackers and gather information. We ended this lesson by discussing ad hoc networks, which are used for temporary connectivity between two or more devices, and NAT servers, which convert private IP addresses to public IP addresses.